Look into this animation entitled The Holographic Cosmogram, taking into account its mutual co-definition and that the spiral emerges from and returns to 4. Then use your comprehension to answer the following questions. Are some people in this world doomed to be dysfunctional and narcissistic due to their own nature? Is narcissism a condition with no cure? Understanding narcissism through the holographic cosmogram, a path to healing. The holographic cosmogram, a framework of interconnectedness. The holographic cosmogram presented in the image represents a profound philosophical and spiritual framework that illustrates the interconnected nature of existence. At its core, the cosmogram depicts various dimensions of being: who, what, why, how, when, where, and all arranged around a central geometric structure at the top, emphasizes our fundamental interconnectedness and mutual co-definition. This concept of interconnectedness is crucial to understanding how we relate to ourselves and others in the world. The spiral pattern that emerges from and returns to the number 4 symbolizes a cyclical journey of growth, transformation, and return. This suggests that our journey through life, including our struggles and healing, begins from and ultimately returns to a place of wholeness and integration. Narcissism, nature, development, and potential for change. The origins of narcissistic patterns. When examining narcissism through the lens of the holographic cosmogram, we can see that narcissistic traits develop as a response to early life experiences, rather than being an immutable aspect of one's nature. Research consistently shows that narcissistic personality disorder, NPD, often develops as a coping mechanism in response to childhood trauma, neglect, or inconsistent parenting. These early experiences create patterns of thinking and relating that become deeply ingrained in the individual's psyche and nervous system. The cosmogram's emphasis on interconnectedness challenges the notion that anyone is inherently or permanently narcissistic. Instead, it suggests that narcissistic traits emerge when the natural flow between self and others becomes disrupted, creating a disconnection from the Ubuntu principle of mutual existence. This disconnection manifests as an excessive focus on the self at the expense of recognizing others, humanity, and need 17. Neuroplasticity and the potential for change. The spiral pattern in the cosmogram symbolizes the potential for transformation and growth that exists within all humans. This aligns with modern neuroscience's understanding of neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections throughout life. Research in neuroplasticity provides compelling evidence that personality patterns, including those associated with personality disorders, can change over time with appropriate interventions. Studies have shown that various therapeutic approaches can effectively modify the neural pathways associated with narcissistic traits, suggesting that these patterns are not fixed or determined solely by nature. The brain's capacity for change continues throughout life, offering hope for those with narcissistic traits who are willing to engage in the healing process. Is narcissism curable? Beyond the binary. Reframing the question of cure. Rather than asking whether narcissism can be cured, a more nuanced approach is to consider the potential for significant healing and transformation. The concept of a complete cure implies a binary state of either having or not having a condition, which doesn't accurately reflect the complex nature of personality patterns. Instead, viewing narcissism through the lens of the cosmogram suggests that healing involves a journey of reconnection with one's authentic self and with others. Research indicates that with appropriate therapeutic interventions, individuals with narcissistic traits can experience substantial improvements in their capacity for empathy, emotional regulation, and interpersonal relationships. While the underlying patterns may not completely disappear, they can be significantly modified to allow for healthier functioning. Effective therapeutic approaches. Several evidence-based therapeutic approaches have shown promise in treating narcissistic personality disorder. Schema therapy. This approach addresses early maladaptive schemas and helps individuals develop healthier patterns of thinking and relating. Studies have shown that schema therapy can reduce narcissistic traits and improve overall functioning. Dialectical behavior therapy (DBT), originally developed for borderline personality disorder, DBT helps individuals improve emotional regulation, interpersonal effectiveness, and distress tolerance. These skills are particularly valuable for those with narcissistic traits who struggle with emotional regulation and interpersonal relationships. Psychodynamic therapy. This approach explores unconscious patterns and early life experiences that contribute to narcissistic behaviors. By understanding these patterns, individuals can develop greater self-awareness and make conscious choices to relate differently to others. 4. Cognitive behavioral therapy (CBT). CBT helps individuals identify and modify distorted thought patterns that contribute to narcissistic behaviors. Through cognitive restructuring and behavioral interventions, individuals can develop more realistic perceptions of themselves and others. The role of self-awareness and vulnerability. The key to healing narcissistic patterns lies in developing self-awareness and the willingness to be vulnerable. As one Reddit user with NPD insightfully noted, the key to healing NPD is actually to be vulnerable. It is to accept failure. It is to accept that it is okay to be a human being. This perspective aligns with the Cosmogram's emphasis on interconnectedness and mutual co-definition. Healing from narcissism involves recognizing and integrating the true self that has been hidden behind defensive patterns. This process requires courage, as it means facing the painful emotions and vulnerabilities that narcissistic defenses were originally created to avoid. 7. The spiral in the Cosmogram symbolizes this journey of returning to authenticity and wholeness. 19. Collective healing and individual transformation. The Ubuntu philosophy represented at the top of the Cosmogram offers a powerful framework for understanding healing from narcissism. The principle "I am because we are" suggests that our individual healing is interconnected with collective healing. From this perspective, narcissism can be understood as a disconnection from our inherent interconnectedness with others. Research on the healing power of community and connection supports this view. Studies have shown that fostering a sense of belonging and connection can significantly improve mental health outcomes and promote healing from various psychological conditions, including personality disorders. The Ubuntu approach emphasizes that healing occurs not in isolation, but through reconnecting with our shared humanity. Spiritual and holistic dimensions of healing. The Cosmogram's integration of spiritual dimensions, represented by the WHO section with Father, insemination, Son, etc., suggests that healing narcissism may involve reconnecting with a sense of meaning and purpose beyond the self. Research on post-traumatic growth and spiritual meaning-making supports this perspective, showing that finding meaning in difficult experiences can facilitate healing and transformation. Holistic approaches to healing narcissism recognize the interconnection between mind, body, and spirit. These approaches may include mindfulness practices, somatic therapies, and spiritual practices that help individuals develop greater self-awareness and connection with something larger than themselves. The Cosmogram's representation of multiple dimensions of existence, what, why, how, when, where, all, aligns with this holistic perspective. Conclusion: the spiral path of healing. The holographic Cosmogram, with its spiral emerging from and returning to 4, offers a profound metaphor for the journey of healing from narcissistic patterns. This journey is not linear but cyclical, involving periods of progress, setbacks, and integration. The spiral suggests that healing is an ongoing process of growth and transformation rather than a destination to be reached. Research on recovery from narcissistic patterns supports this view, indicating that healing occurs in stages and often involves cycles of awareness, grief, releasing shame, developing tenacity, and ultimately finding freedom from patterns of worship and idealization. Each cycle brings the individual closer to wholeness and authentic connection with self and others. 19. In conclusion, the evidence suggests that no one is doomed to remain narcissistic due to their inherent nature. While narcissism may not be curable in the traditional sense, Significant healing and transformation are possible through appropriate therapeutic interventions, self-awareness, and reconnection with our shared humanity. The holographic cosmogram reminds us that we are all on a journey of growth and transformation, spiraling toward greater wholeness and interconnection. How do I accurately and reliably spot narcissistic traits in myself and others? And how do I know when to break off any contact as a way of self-protection? Identifying narcissistic traits and knowing when to protect yourself. Understanding how to recognize narcissistic traits in yourself and others is crucial for maintaining healthy relationships and protecting your well-being. This comprehensive guide will help you develop the skills to identify these patterns accurately and make informed decisions about when to establish boundaries or end contact entirely. Understanding narcissistic traits, the core characteristics, the special me framework. Mental health professionals use a helpful acronym to remember the 9 key signs of narcissistic personality disorder. Special me, sense of self-importance, preoccupation with power, beauty, or success. Entitled behavior, can only be around people who are important or special, interpersonally exploitative for their own gain. Arrogant attitudes and behaviors, lack empathy, must be admired, envious of others or believe that others are envious of them. Primary narcissistic traits to watch for. Grandiose sense of self-importance. Individuals with narcissistic traits have an unreasonably high sense of their own importance and require constant excessive admiration. They expect to be recognized as superior even without achievements and make their accomplishments seem bigger than they are. Lack of empathy. One of the most prominent indicators is the inability to understand or care about others' feelings. This emotional handicap makes them unable to walk a mile in another's shoes and results in very low emotional intelligence. Manipulative and controlling behavior. Narcissists commonly use manipulation or controlling behavior to get what they want. They may try to please and impress initially, but their own needs ultimately come first. They often exploit others to gain something for themselves while showing little regard for others' needs. Excessive need for admiration. A constant need for praise or admiration is one of the most common signs. They often brag or exaggerate their accomplishments for recognition and require validation from others to boost their ego. Entitlement. They believe they deserve privileges and special treatment, often becoming rude or abusive when they don't receive what they think they deserve. 2 types of narcissism to recognize. Grandiose narcissism. People with grandiose narcissism were likely treated as superior during childhood, leading to expectations that follow them into adulthood. They tend to be aggressive, dominant, magnify their importance, and are very self-confident but not sensitive to criticism. Vulnerable covert narcissism. This type usually results from childhood neglect or abuse. These individuals fear abandonment, feel insecure but act overly confident, and need others' approval. Their narcissistic behavior protects them from feeling inadequate, though they fluctuate between feeling inferior and superior to others. Signs of covert narcissism include hypersensitivity to criticism, a weak sense of self, need for validation, and acting like victims. They often feel the world owes them and believe others have better lives. How to identify narcissistic traits in yourself. Self-reflection questions. Research shows that narcissists can actually engage in self-reflection, though it may be limited in emotional depth. Ask yourself these honest questions. Do I crave admiration and praise? Do I struggle to empathize with others? Do I feel superior to those around me? Am I overly sensitive to criticism? Do I expect special treatment or feel entitled to privileges? The challenge of self-assessment. It's important to note that narcissistic traits can fluctuate in daily life. Higher narcissistic traits lead to more within-person variability in narcissistic states, meaning these patterns aren't always consistent. Additionally, individuals with narcissistic traits often have limited ability to recognize their own contribution to problems or impact on others. Seeking external feedback. While self-reflection is helpful, external feedback is essential for accurate assessment. Trusted friends, family, or colleagues. 7. Ask, do they feel heard and valued in conversations with you? Do they perceive you as open to criticism, or do you become defensive? Do they think you show genuine care and concern for others? Remember that narcissistic behavior often manifests behind closed doors, making external observations particularly valuable. Red flags, early warning signs in others, love bombing, and relationship pacing. One of the earliest red flags is when someone pushes for relationships to move faster than normal. They look for emotional intimacy too early or in inappropriate circumstances. This intense love bombing cannot be sustained, so efforts wear off quickly, replaced by their true narcissistic behaviors. Communication and boundary issues. Watch for these concerning patterns. They don't communicate well or expect you to read their mind. They don't like boundaries and don't respect them. They use silent treatment during conflicts. They label you as psycho or crazy when confronted about suspicious behavior. They call all their exes crazy. Control and manipulation tactics. Key red flags include need to have control over situations and people, financial dominance and coercive control, sharing only selective information to maintain control, making you think you're the problem, excessive need to be the center of attention, inflated self-image combined with lack of consideration for others, gaslighting and reality distortion. Narcissists intentionally distort the truth to make you doubt your recollection of events. Common gaslighting phrases include 13. You're overreacting. That never happened. You're too sensitive. You're imagining things. Narcissistic manipulation tactics to recognize common abusive strategies, false accusations, making unfounded claims to provoke defensive reactions, causing emotional chaos and confusion. This ongoing cycle can lead to significant emotional distress and erode self-esteem. Guilt tripping, making victims feel responsible for the narcissist's emotional state, exploiting empathy and desire to avoid conflict. This can lead to feelings of helplessness and self-blame. Silent treatment, refusing communication to create discomfort and frustration, designed to make victims feel powerless and desperate for attention. The goal is to establish dominance and control. Triangulation, involving third parties to create jealousy or insecurity, saying things like so-and-so thinks I'm amazing or why can't you be more like them. Isolation and financial control. Narcissists often interfere with their victims' social contacts, making it difficult to maintain relationships with supportive friends and family. They may also interfere with work or encourage stopping work altogether, creating financial dependence. When to consider breaking contact. Critical decision points. Assessing your safety and well-being. The decision to cut contact should be based on how the relationship affects multiple areas of your life. Consider no contact when your physical safety is in jeopardy. Several areas of your life are being destroyed by maintaining the relationship. Your physical, emotional, mental, financial, spiritual, or social health is suffering. Physical safety concerns. If you don't feel safe, this is the clearest indicator that no contact may be necessary. Some narcissists may experience narcissistic collapse, which can look like rage and lead them to attack those around them. You may feel terrified, shocked, or hypervigilant when around them. Emotional and psychological impact. Pay attention to your body's signals. If you feel sick at the thought of seeing this person or feel sick after talking to them, no contact may be something to consider. Trust these physical responses as they often indicate deeper psychological harm. The pattern recognition approach. Rather than waiting for a specific line in the sand to be crossed, observe ongoing patterns. Narcissists often know how to stay just under that line while still causing harm. Consider keeping a journal to track interactions and their effects on you. 18. Implementing no contact, a strategic approach. What no contact involves. 13. This no contact means stopping and blocking all communication with the narcissist includes no phone calls or texting, no contact via third parties. blocking them from social media, not following their social media, not accepting gifts, not dwelling on thoughts of them, not planning revenge, preparing for no contact. Build your support system. Tell supportive friends or family about your decision, and ask for emotional support. If you doubt your decision, this network can offer reality checks and encouragement. Expect mixed feelings. You may encounter difficult days when you feel guilty, sad, or lonely. 13. These feelings are normal, especially if you once had a close relationship with this person. 13. Prepare for retaliation. Narcissists may react with love bombing, gaslighting, excessive calling, texting, stalking, contacting family friends, or seeking revenge through smear campaigns. 13. Have a safety plan. Be ready to get help if you feel threatened, as narcissists might become angry and vengeful due to frustration and poor impulse control. What happens to the narcissist? Going no contact often negatively impacts the narcissist because they need admiration, control, and reassurance to maintain their self-esteem. Or they may experience narcissistic collapse, depression and anxiety, intense anger, self-directed or toward you, desperate attempts to regain narcissistic supply, denial about the relationship ending, feeling challenged to get you back, alternative strategies, when no contact isn't possible, limited contact approach, when ending all contact isn't feasible, such as with parents, bosses, or co-parents, consider limited contact, setting time limits on conversations, being around them only when others are present, establishing clear financial boundaries, using the gray rock method, responding with indifference and minimal emotion, setting boundaries. When maintaining some contact is necessary, establish clear boundaries. Know what you will and won't tolerate. Make decisions based on your relationship type and personal limits. Learn to say no. Recognize that their requests usually center on what's best for them, with little regard for your well-being. Don't explain or defend. Avoid justifying your decisions, as they'll only see it from their perspective. Set consequences and stick to them. State limits clearly and follow through consistently. Don't engage in emotional drama. Use the gray rock method when appropriate. Understanding the process. Recovery from narcissistic relationships is not linear but cyclical, involving periods of progress, setbacks, and integration. The journey requires patience with yourself and recognition that healing occurs in stages. Professional support. Consider working with a mental health professional who understands narcissistic abuse patterns. They can help you develop accurate self-assessment skills, learn healthy boundary-setting techniques, process trauma from narcissistic relationships, build stronger support networks, develop strategies for maintaining no contact or limited contact. Remember your worth. The most important aspect of identifying and protecting yourself from narcissistic traits is remembering that you deserve healthy, respectful relationships. Trust your instincts, prioritize your well-being, and don't hesitate to seek support when making these difficult but necessary decisions for your safety and mental health. By understanding these patterns and warning signs, you can make informed decisions about your relationships and take appropriate action to protect yourself from narcissistic abuse. Remember that recognizing these traits is the first step toward creating healthier boundaries and relationships in your life. How do I deal with feelings of guilt for abandoning a narcissistic relationship and therefore activating the narcissist's worst fears? Managing guilt after leaving a narcissistic relationship, understanding and healing. Experiencing guilt after leaving a narcissistic relationship is one of the most complex and challenging aspects of recovery that survivors face. The feeling that you've abandoned someone and triggered their deepest fears can create a profound internal conflict, even when you logically understand that leaving was necessary for your well-being. This guilt is not a sign of weakness or selfishness. It's a natural response rooted in the psychological dynamics that narcissistic relationships create. Understanding why guilt emerges after leaving. The psychology of responsibility for others' emotions. The guilt you're experiencing stems from a fundamental shift in how narcissistic relationships condition you to think about responsibility. During the course of narcissistic abuse, you were likely pressured to believe that the only way to survive was to make the narcissistic abuser happy with you. This creates a psychological framework where you assume responsibility for their emotional well-being, often at the expense of your own. When you were in the relationship, you had to discount the importance of your own happiness and elevate the importance of theirs. This trade-off was an ingenious survival strategy that allowed you to maintain some form of attachment where complete abandonment wasn't an option. However, this conditioning means that leaving the relationship can initially feel like you're violating a sacred rule, that you are responsible for the narcissist's emotional state before your own, the abandonment cycle and your response. Understanding the narcissistic abandonment cycle helps explain why your departure activates such intense reactions. The cycle typically begins when the narcissist feels shame about something, whether it's childhood abuse, socioeconomic status, an embarrassing moment, or being exposed as incompetent. Instead of seeking comfort from someone they love, narcissists avoid intimacy for fear of further exposure and often lash out at the person most likely to be supportive. When they leave even briefly, narcissists suddenly realize their exit means complications. They won't receive their daily need for attention, affirmation, and appreciation. This fear of abandonment by others causes them to overlook their embarrassment and return with promises and grand gestures. The pattern repeats because it feeds their ego and maintains control. Your decision to leave permanently disrupts this cycle, which can indeed trigger the narcissist's worst fears of abandonment. However, it's crucial to understand that these fears existed. Recognizing the deeper dynamics at play, trauma bonding and psychological conditioning. The guilt you're experiencing is intensified by trauma bonding, a psychological conditioning that develops when an abuser provides intermittent rewards and punishments. This creates powerful emotional bonds that are extremely resistant to change. Trauma bonding literally makes you psychologically addicted to your abuser, which explains why trying to stop contact feels like you're coming off a drug. The longer you remained with the narcissistic abuser, the more difficult it became to break the trauma bond. Trauma, fear, and abandonment actually increase feelings of attachment. The more you've been hurt by them, the more intensely attached you become. This biological response makes the guilt feel overwhelming and authentic, even when it's based on conditioned responses rather than reality. Understanding your conditioning. Many survivors weren't given the tools to deal with narcissistic abuse effectively. Dealing with the narcissist requires an intuitive, assertive, confident, no-nonsense mindset, qualities that were often discouraged or even dangerous to develop during formative years. If you had narcissistic or abusive parents, standing up to an abuser would have been dangerous as a dependent child. You may have been conditioned to feel guilty for not putting up with difficult people. Now you're guilting yourself for putting up with them for so long. Feeling guilty has become a habit you were trained into. This explains why the guilt feels so familiar and compelling. Strategies for overcoming guilt. 1. Reframe your understanding of responsibility. The first step in overcoming guilt is understanding that you are not responsible for the narcissist's emotional well-being. You can arm yourself with the understanding that your guilt stems from the assumption of responsibility for their emotions, an assumption that was necessary for survival but is no longer serving you. Gently challenge this premise by asking yourself, what objective evidence suggests their needs are more important than your own? Why should you sacrifice your safety and well-being to manage their fears? As you practice extending attention to these questions, it will grow to feel safer and less guilt-inducing as you maintain your separation. 2. Practice self-compassion techniques. Self-compassion is crucial for healing from narcissistic abuse guilt. The narcissist did not have a realistic or accurate view of who you are. They lack the capacity to genuinely appreciate the deep value of another person. Research shows that practicing self-compassion involves 3 key elements: self-kindness versus self-judgment. Treat yourself with the same care and support you would offer a close friend struggling with similar circumstances. Reframe harsh self-criticism into understanding and empathy for your situation. Common humanity versus isolation. Recognize that suffering and making relationship mistakes are universal human experiences. You are not uniquely flawed for staying in a narcissistic relationship. Many intelligent, capable people find themselves in similar situations. Mindfulness versus over-identification. Observe your guilt and pain from a slight distance without identifying completely with these feelings. Your struggle is not everything about you. 3. Use third-person self-talk. When contemplating your situation or working through guilt, try using third-person language rather than first-person pronouns. Instead of saying, "I feel guilty," use your name. Sarah feels guilty about leaving. This technique helps engage the regulation portion of your brain and calms emotional reactivity. It increases feelings of kindness and empathy for yourself while providing easier access to logic and reasoning. 4. Build safe connections. Connect with other safe people and communities who understand narcissistic abuse. This is crucial for reducing the deep fear, anxiety, and guilt that comes with separating from the only form of attachment you've known. The goal is to know that although leaving feels similar to past trauma, you're in a different situation today with people who genuinely care about your well-being. Support groups, therapy, or online communities of survivors can provide validation and perspective. Having people who can see and recognize your attempts to do right by yourself creates a foundation for healing. 5. Understand it seemed like a good idea at the time. This is a powerfully freeing perspective to adopt. On some level, staying with the narcissist for as long as you did truly seemed like the best course of action available to you at the time. Maybe you knew it was terrible, but it seemed better than the alternatives. We do the best we can until we know better. And learning is a process that unfolds over time. Why their fears are not your responsibility. Narcissists have an intense fear of abandonment that stems from deep-seated insecurities in childhood experiences. This fear manifests in grandiose behavior that masks vulnerability. They present an inflated sense of self-importance to avoid feelings of inadequacy and worthlessness. However, these abandonment fears existed before your relationship and are rooted in their psychological makeup, not your actions. The fear of abandonment is so central to narcissistic psychology that they're willing to end relationships on their own terms, but don't like being left. 6. This need for control is a grandiose defense that protects their vulnerable parts. 6. What happens when you leave? Going no contact often negatively impacts narcissists because they need admiration, control, and reassurance to maintain their self-esteem. They may experience narcissistic collapse, depression, anxiety, intense anger, or desperate attempts to regain control. However, these reactions are not evidence that you've done something wrong. They're evidence of the narcissist's psychological vulnerabilities. The narcissist may try various tactics to re-establish contact, including love bombing, gaslighting, excessive calling or texting, or even stalking. They might also engage in smear campaigns or seek revenge. Preparing for these possibilities while maintaining your boundaries is essential for your safety and recovery. Healing strategies for long-term recovery. Recognize the stages of healing. Healing from narcissistic abuse typically unfolds in stages, each marking a key part of the recovery process. These stages often include denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, along with setting boundaries, letting go, and rebuilding. Understanding that guilt is a normal part of this process can help normalize your experience. The benefits of working through these stages include improved ability to move forward, capacity to engage with others healthily, and the ability to learn from your experiences. Despite progress, it's normal for some guilt and self-expectations to persist. Healing is not linear. 13. Focus on practical self-care. During this vulnerable time, prioritize concrete self-care activities. Seek professional help through therapy, coaching, or support groups specialized in narcissistic abuse recovery. Set small, attainable goals for emotional healing. Even tiny forward momentum requires courage and neutralizes guilt and shame. Practice saying no to overextending yourself. engage in activities that restore your sense of self and autonomy. To support your healing and reduce guilt, avoid behaviors that can increase the bond to the abuser. Try to avoid unnecessary contact with the narcissist. Limit viewing their social media or seeking information about them. Work actively to banish negative self-talk by shifting into a compassionate state when you catch yourself being self-critical. Moving forward, embracing your right to protect yourself. You are not abandoning anyone. Reframe your understanding of what leaving represents. You are not abandoning the narcissist. You are protecting yourself from further harm. The concept of abandonment implies leaving someone who is vulnerable and dependent on your care. However, narcissists are adults who are responsible for managing their own emotions and getting their own needs met. Your primary responsibility is to ensure your own safety and well-being. Research on intimate partner violence shows that feelings of guilt are among the main obstacles women face when trying to leave violent relationships. These feelings are often the result of manipulation and distorted thinking caused by the abuser's tactics. Trust your decision. Remember that leaving a narcissistic relationship requires immense courage and strength. The decision to prioritize your safety and mental health over someone else's comfort is not selfish, it's necessary. Many people struggle to understand narcissistic abuse from the outside, which can make you doubt your decision. However, your lived experience of the relationship is valid and worthy of protection. Patience with the process. Healing from narcissistic abuse and overcoming guilt is a process that requires patience and self-compassion. As best as possible, offer yourself kindness and understanding as you take incremental steps toward freedom. Think of this as turning around a barge rather than a sailboat. It requires a persistent and steady hand to do safely and successfully. The guilt you're experiencing is a normal part of breaking free from a harmful relationship dynamic. With time, support, and consistent self-care, these feelings will diminish as you rebuild your sense of self and establish healthier relationship patterns. Your decision to leave was an act of self-preservation and courage, not abandonment, and you deserve to live free from guilt about protecting yourself. How can the principle of Ubuntu within the Cosmogram help me correct the perception of such actions as selfish? Ubuntu philosophy, reframing self-protection as sacred interconnectedness. Understanding Ubuntu's core wisdom. Ubuntu, an ancient African philosophy translating to I am because we are, offers a profound framework for understanding the apparent contradiction between self-care and communal responsibility. This philosophy recognizes that our individual well-being is inextricably intertwined with the well-being of others. 3. Creating a foundation where protecting yourself becomes an act of service to the collective rather than selfish abandonment. The Ubuntu principle embedded within the holographic cosmogram represents more than philosophical theory. It embodies a lived understanding that individuals exist within a web of relationships and are defined by their interactions with others. This interconnected worldview challenges Western individualistic frameworks that often create false dichotomies between self-care and community care. Redefining selfishness through Ubuntu lens. The false binary of individual versus collective good. Traditional Western thinking often presents self-preservation and community welfare as opposing forces, but Ubuntu philosophy reveals this as a fundamental misunderstanding. As research demonstrates, Ubuntu emphasizes that the individual must not sacrifice their own good in the pursuit of the common good, but should pursue their own good by pursuing the common good. This perspective transforms how we understand protective actions in narcissistic relationships. When you establish boundaries or leave harmful situations, you're not abandoning someone, you're recognizing the humanity in others while honoring your own inherent dignity. Ubuntu's principle that a person is a person through other persons means your wholeness contributes to collective healing, not collective harm. Approach to responsibility and interconnectedness. Ubuntu philosophy addresses the guilt that often accompanies self-protective actions by reframing responsibility itself. The philosophy promotes self-awareness and societal responsibility as interconnected rather than competing values. This means taking care of your mental, emotional, and spiritual health becomes a form of collective responsibility rather than individual selfishness. The Cosmogram's representation of Ubuntu encompassing I, we, you, me, us, them, mine, ours, yours, illustrates that healthy boundaries actually strengthen the fabric of interconnectedness rather than tear it. When you protect yourself from narcissistic abuse, you're preventing the erosion of Ubuntu within that relationship system, transforming guilt through Ubuntu understanding. From individual shame to collective healing, Ubuntu offers a powerful antidote to the guilt associated with leaving narcissistic relationships by recognizing that feelings of guilt and shame contribute to the development of the ability to substantiate and subordinate moral values. However, Ubuntu distinguishes between productive guilt that promotes growth and destructive guilt that perpetuates harm. In Ubuntu philosophy, shame requires a social setting and potential observer whose expected reaction is at issue, while guilt needs no one but yourself. This distinction helps clarify that the shame you feel about abandoning someone is actually about how others might perceive your actions, not about the moral rightness of protecting yourself. The spiritual dimension of self-protection. Ubuntu extends beyond human relationships to encompass the interconnectedness between individuals, nature, and spirituality. This holistic view means that protecting yourself from abuse is actually protecting the sacred interconnectedness that Ubuntu seeks to uphold. When someone's behavior disrupts this natural harmony through manipulation and control, stepping away becomes an act of spiritual integrity. The philosophy recognizes that whatever happens to the individual happens to the whole group, and whatever happens to the whole group happens to the individual. This means your healing journey contributes to collective healing, while remaining in abusive situations perpetuates collective harm. Practical applications of Ubuntu in boundary setting. Ubuntu-informed boundary setting. Ubuntu philosophy supports healthy boundary setting by emphasizing that boundaries aren't restraints, but a way of defining your values. The philosophy teaches that you can choose to live your lives with a deep awareness of Ubuntu and its deeply rooted virtues of respect and compassion toward others, which includes respecting your own need for safety and well-being. When setting boundaries through an Ubuntu lens, consider these principles. Collective consciousness. Your boundaries protect not just you, but the integrity of all relationships in your life. Mutual respect. Healthy boundaries demonstrate respect for both yourself and others by creating clear expectations. Restorative justice. Ubuntu encourages restorative solutions rather than adversarial ones when conflicts arise. The community aspect of individual healing. Ubuntu philosophy recognizes that healing requires a collective effort, not just individual therapy. This means your decision to leave a narcissistic relationship and seek healing actually serves the broader community by modeling healthy relationship patterns for others, breaking cycles of abuse that could affect future generations, demonstrating that self-respect and community care are compatible, contributing to collective wisdom about healthy relationships. Ubuntu's challenge to Western guilt paradigms. Decolonizing guilt and responsibility. Ubuntu philosophy offers an African contribution to global efforts that challenges Western-centric understandings of guilt and responsibility. Traditional Western frameworks often individualize problems that are actually systemic, leading to inappropriate guilt when people protect themselves from harmful systems. The philosophy challenges Western values of individuality and living for today without considering others and future generations. But this doesn't mean sacrificing yourself for others' comfort. Instead, it means recognizing that your long-term well-being serves future generations better than short-term people-pleasing that perpetuates dysfunction. Collective responsibility for healing. Ubuntu's emphasis on collective responsibility and mutual support means that healing from narcissistic abuse is not just an individual journey, but a community obligation. This reframes your healing work as contributing to collective wisdom rather than selfish self-focus. The philosophy recognizes that community sections should take collective and holistic control of available resources for universal welfare, which includes emotional and spiritual resources. Your decision to protect and heal yourself makes these resources available to your community rather than depleting them through ongoing trauma. Living Ubuntu, beyond the guilt. The spiral path of interconnected healing. The holographic cosmogram spiral pattern that emerges from and returns to wholeness reflects Ubuntu's understanding that healing is both individual and collective. Your journey away from narcissistic relationships follows this spiral path, moving through necessary separation toward deeper, healthier interconnection. Ubuntu teaches that we achieve ourselves by sharing with and caring for others, but this sharing must come from a place of wholeness rather than depletion. By healing yourself, you develop the capacity for authentic Ubuntu rather than the false interconnection that narcissistic relationships demand. Embracing your role in collective healing. Ubuntu philosophy ultimately reveals that protecting yourself from narcissistic abuse is not selfish abandonment but sacred responsibility to the interconnected web of life. When you step away from harmful relationships, you're not breaking Ubuntu. You're restoring it by refusing to participate in patterns that deny the fundamental dignity of all involved. The cosmogram's representation of multiple dimensions of being, who, what, why, how, when, where, and all, reminds us that your healing touches every aspect of existence. Your courage to prioritize your well-being gives others permission to do the same, creating ripple effects of healing throughout your community and beyond. Through Ubuntu's wisdom, we understand that true fulfillment comes from our connections with others, but these connections must be based on mutual respect and genuine care, rather than exploitation and control. Your decision to leave narcissistic relationships opens space for authentic Ubuntu to flourish, for yourself, your community, and future generations who will benefit from the healthier patterns you're establishing. Could it be that we are all equally narcissists from the viewpoint of our unique perceptions? The paradox of perception. Are we all equally narcissistic? Your question touches on a profound philosophical paradox that sits at the heart of human consciousness and our understanding of narcissism. The idea that we might all be equally narcissistic due to our unique perceptions reveals the tension between necessary self-awareness and pathological self-centeredness, a tension beautifully addressed by both modern psychological research and the Ubuntu philosophy embedded in the holographic cosmogram. The spectrum of narcissism, from necessary to pathological. Healthy narcissism as universal human experience. Research confirms that narcissism exists on a continuum that ranges from normal to abnormal personality expression, with many psychologists believing that a moderate degree of narcissism is normal and healthy in humans. This healthy narcissism is not just beneficial for individuals, it can benefit human civilization as a whole. As one expert notes, when we can acknowledge and endorse our strengths and skills as individuals, which requires healthy narcissism, we are giving ourselves opportunities to grow and flourish. This suggests that having a unique perspective and some degree of self-focus is not only normal but necessary for psychological health and social functioning. The key distinction lies not in the presence of self-awareness, but in how that awareness relates to others and the broader community. The Ubuntu resolution, I am because we are. The Ubuntu philosophy represented in the holographic cosmogram offers a profound resolution to this apparent paradox. Rather than viewing individual perception as inherently narcissistic, Ubuntu teaches that our individual existence is fundamentally relational and interconnected. The principle, I am because we are, suggests that even our most personal, unique perceptions are shaped by and dependent upon our relationships with others. From this perspective, having a unique viewpoint doesn't make us narcissistic. It makes us human. The cosmogram's representation of interconnected dimensions who, what, why, how, when, where, all illustrates that our individual perspectives are part of a larger holographic whole where each part contains information about the entirety. What distinguishes pathological narcissism? The research reveals that pathological narcissism is characterized not by having a unique perspective, but by specific traits that disrupt healthy interconnection. These include lack of empathy, the inability to understand or care about others' feelings; interpersonal exploitation, using others for personal gain while showing little regard for their needs; entitlement, believing one deserves privileges and special treatment; arrogant attitudes, displaying superiority that dismisses others' worth. Importantly, research shows that narcissists actually do have insight into their personality and reputation. They understand that others see them less positively than they see themselves. This awareness distinguishes their condition from simple self-focus or unique perception. The role of meta-perception. Studies demonstrate that narcissists have some insight into the fact that they make positive first impressions that deteriorate over time, and they have insight into their narcissistic personality traits. This suggests that the issue isn't lack of awareness about their unique perspective, but rather a choice to prioritize their own needs at the expense of genuine connection with others. In contrast, healthy individuals with unique perspectives can maintain what researchers call accurate meta-perceptions, understanding how others perceive them while still maintaining their individual viewpoint. The holographic nature of consciousness. Individual uniqueness within universal patterns. The holographic cosmogram spiral pattern that emerges from and returns to the number 4 represents how individual consciousness participates in universal patterns without losing its uniqueness. This framework suggests that we can simultaneously hold unique individual perspectives that are genuinely our own, awareness of our interconnectedness with all other perspectives, recognition of universal patterns that transcend individual viewpoints. This holographic understanding resolves the apparent contradiction by showing that individual uniqueness and universal connection are not opposites but complementary aspects of a single reality. The mathematical elegance of diversity. The cosmogram's mathematical relationships, represented by the equations at the bottom, suggest that diversity of perspective is not a problem to be solved, but a fundamental feature of consciousness itself. Just as a hologram requires multiple interference patterns to create a complete image, collective human consciousness requires diverse individual perspectives to approach completeness. Practical implications: living the balance, healthy self-awareness versus pathological self-centeredness. The research suggests we need both individual self-care and community awareness, the ability to take care of ourselves and the ability to tend to the community at large by taking in the needs and perspectives of others. Both are valuable traits to keep in balance. This balance can be understood through the cosmogram's dimensions. Who? Recognizing our unique identity while honoring others' identities. What? Understanding our personal needs while considering collective needs. Why? Pursuing our individual purpose while serving the greater good. How? Using our unique methods while remaining open to others' approaches. When, where? Honoring our personal timing while respecting collective rhythms. The personal sense of uniqueness. Research shows that both adaptive and pathological expressions of grandiose narcissism share a greater sense of self-uniqueness. However, the key difference lies in whether this uniqueness is held in isolation or in relationship. Healthy uniqueness recognizes that personal sense of uniqueness could be responsible for high levels of life satisfaction while maintaining connection with others. Conclusion: the dance of individual and universal. Rather than suggesting we are all equally narcissistic, your question reveals that we are all equally unique. And this uniqueness is not a flaw but a feature of consciousness itself. The holographic cosmogram and Ubuntu philosophy teach us that our individual perspectives are both precious and partial, both necessary and insufficient. The difference between healthy self-awareness and pathological narcissism lies not in the uniqueness of our perceptions, but in our willingness to hold that uniqueness in relationship with others. When we recognize that our unique viewpoint is part of a larger holographic whole, where each perspective contains valuable information about the totality, we can maintain our individuality while participating in the interconnected web of existence that Ubuntu describes. In this understanding, we are all equally human, rather than equally narcissistic. Our unique perceptions become gifts to the collective, rather than barriers to connection, and our individual consciousness becomes a window into the universal, rather than a prison of self-centeredness. The spiral path of the Cosmogram reminds us that true wisdom lies in embracing both our uniqueness and our unity, dancing between individual expression and collective wisdom. I think I understand. Ultimately, we can avoid falling into the narcissistic trap of viewing our own partial perspective as the objective truth that others must acknowledge and adopt, by integrating the partial truths we recognize within someone else's perspective. Do you agree? Yes, your understanding aligns closely with both psychological research and the philosophical insights represented in the holographic cosmogram. Narcissism, as shown in empirical studies, is fundamentally characterized by a diminished motivation or ability to take others' perspectives, often due to a heightened need for control and self-focus. This self-centeredness leads to viewing one's own partial perspective as the objective truth, dismissing or invalidating others' viewpoints to protect one's ego. However, research also demonstrates that when individuals, including those with narcissistic tendencies, consciously engage in perspective-taking, their capacity for empathy and understanding increases. This means narcissism is not a fixed state, but a relational and motivational pattern that can be shifted through intentional integration of others' partial truths. From the Cosmogram's viewpoint, every perspective is partial. No single viewpoint captures the whole truth. The Cosmogram's structure and the Ubuntu principle, I am because we are, both suggest that our understanding is enriched, not threatened, by integrating what is true in another's experience. Philosophically, as in the analysis of scientific models, partial truths from different perspectives can be instrumentally valuable, and when combined, bring us closer to a more holistic understanding. In summary, we avoid the narcissistic trap of absolutizing our own perspective by actively seeking, recognizing, and integrating the partial truths present in others' viewpoints. This not only counters narcissism but also fosters empathy, mutual growth, and a more complete grasp of reality, both individually and collectively.